Hey guys, welcome back to the Summer of Ecclesiastes. We are building up to the book of Ecclesiastes. If you want to see the actual exposition of the text, we will get to that. But what we're doing is we're laying out this groundwork so that you guys can take this information, turn it into your own lessons, turn it into your own studies, understand the book more, and appreciate some of the things that Solomon went through in the lead up to writing this book. Now, he does become the king. That's one of those main things that's laid out there in Ecclesiastes, where he was king in Jerusalem. And how this happens, he has a brother by the name of Adonijah. Now, I'm not sure how much you've studied Adonijah, all the stuff that goes along with him, but here we go. Now, Adonijah is going to try to take over the throne because he sees that David is dead, almost dead, and he sees, hey, I have this chance. And so what he does is he tries to get a group of people together, starts basically having his own ceremony to get himself crowned king. That was not how it was supposed to go. That's not the promise David made. And so Bathsheba and Nathan get together, and not Nathan the prophet, not Nathan the son, and they work together to come up with this plan to make sure Solomon is installed instead. And so basically it's a long story short. Bathsheba's going to go in, kind of play the, oh, I thought Solomon was going to be king. And then Nathan's going to come walking in and go, oh, Adonijah's trying to usurp the throne. Here's an idea. And so they kind of work together. They plan this on David. And so that's what's going on. Now, yeah, it works. And Nathan comes, and so David basically right there as Adonijah is coming with his little procession, David declares Solomon as the next king, lets him take over the throne, and so that's what you have right here off the bat. Solomon is basically inserted, and Adonijah realizes the big mistake that he's made. Now, Solomon will act wisely. He will carry out some interesting last requests. David didn't take care of a lot of his own problems. And so in the exile of Absalom, there was this guy Shimei who came out and cursed him and threw dirt and all that. And David said, I'm not going to kill him. God sent him out to rebuke me, and I'm not going to be part. But then as he's dying, he goes, hey, Solomon, go take care of this guy. And so it's interesting. Now, Solomon does behave wisely in this. And so what he does is he tells Shimei, he says, okay, I'm not going to kill you outright. I'm not going to be responsible for just murdering you. However, because of what you did to my father, I'm going to put you under house arrest, and if you ever leave, then it's a death sentence. And so Shimei says, okay, I agree to that, not that he has a choice. And several years later, he ends up leaving the city to go after a servant that left, and that's what ends up taking his own life. Joab is this general who has violated David's orders again and again and again. He's done all sorts of things, murdering innocent people. David never dealt with it. I don't know why. I don't know what David's thought process was, but David says, all right, you have to take care of him too. Don't let him die a peaceful death. And so that's what Solomon does. Solomon takes out Joab. And so that's how this all works. But then you've got the situation of the threat that is Adonijah. And this is where it gets a little weird because, again, you're going to have to check the extra content, the side note, for a little explanation of this. Because with Adonijah, the whole reason Adonijah is put to death is because he asks for Abishag. Now, Abishag was, again, one of those sort of concubine-type beings for David. And there was a whole category of reasoning behind it. But Solomon basically says, Adonijah, if you don't try to usurp the throne, then I will let you go. And Adonijah apparently tried to usurp the throne, and so he is put to death. Now the summary is, and you can see a little bit more of my reading on the subject, she was only supposed to be the bride of someone who was royal, or could become king, and Adonijah was not one of those. And so him asking for Abishag, that's why Solomon will say, oh, are you asking for my whole kingdom too? And he'll put him to death, because that's what it was implying. Now, Solomon is going to show his wisdom throughout his life. So as we deal with Solomon's early wisdom, he is not just divinely inspired. In fact, he's shown his wisdom all the way up until this point. God is going to give him some extra wisdom. He's going to give him some supernatural insight. But there's a lot of study, there's a lot of research, there's a lot of work that Solomon puts into this. We can't just chalk all of Solomon's wisdom up until, he just got this memory dump downloaded into his brain. No, Solomon is unbelievably wise just from the get-go. One of the earliest examples is his importance in sacrificing to God and going to God as the source of his wisdom. God appears, I mean, you look at the number of sacrifices he makes, and God appears and says, what is it that you want? And Solomon says, I want wisdom. I don't know how to rule this people. Give me the insight to do it. And God says, because you didn't ask for your enemies' heads, because you didn't ask for wealth, I'll give you that, but I'm also going to give you the wisdom you asked for. And so again, it's what Solomon's known for. It's what Solomon's all about. And Solomon will demonstrate great wisdom both before and after this event. Again, he will prepare the temple. He will find the right people for the temple, which is again, big part of leadership is finding the right people to do the job that you don't know how to do. And Solomon will take a big interest in building projects. He will build the temple, build his house, all that. But again, you've got some very, very skilled workers who are going to be the ones to do this. This is about 11 years into his reign. He does this and finishes it. And again, just this glorious temple that's the standard of all temples from then on. He also builds a grand palace that actually has to expand the city to encompass it. He then dedicates the temple, and God will accept this dedication. But then this is interesting, and this plays out for some future things, but not so much for Ecclesiastes. He will warn of a punishment for disobedience and a blessing for obedience. So that's kind of this interesting take that you get leading from it. Now, we could say a lot more about Solomon's life. Again, we'll cover most of that in Ecclesiastes itself. He'll use slave labor and other things to build a lot of things throughout his kingdom. He will get honor from even the Queen of Sheba, other people who travels from afar to see his glory. And again, he gains a lot of notoriety through trade and just very skillful living. Just very skillful living. But again, his failure is going to come in a similar way to his father with women. But really, it's a political thing. Because back then, you would make alliances by marrying into the family of those who you wanted alliance with. And that is what's going to happen here. And so he's going to build all these alliances with other countries. He has 1,000, between wives and concubines, 1,000 women. And it leads his heart away into idolatry. And that is what happens. And that's where this punishment comes. Now, this idolatry is not mentioned in Ecclesiastes. It's not mentioned, I believe, in Chronicles when you get into some of the summaries of Solomon's life there, because that's not the point. Solomon is not justifying what he did. He's not really getting into some of the major sins that he committed. He's talking about a lot of the stuff that we would get into, but again, the idolatry doesn't play a role. That is one of the reasons people kind of struggle with knowing whether Solomon wrote Ecclesiastes or not, because for idolatry being such a big part of his life, you think that would come into play, but it really doesn't for the most part. And so that's where, again, this is really what's going to rip the kingdom apart, is Solomon's idolatry. And again, it wasn't saying everything he did was wise. It was pretty foolish. And so maybe that's another reason why it's not included. So just keep that in mind as you guys deal with the book. It does not cover the idolatry aspect, and that's going to be a major part here of Ecclesiastes. Now, to wrap up his life, as a result of all the idolatry and all the things that Solomon will do, this is what God's going to do. God's going to step in his sovereignty, and he's going to remove, you'll see me use this illustration a lot. It's a hedge of protection that God has put around Solomon. And God's going to remove that hedge of protection, and God's going to stir up trouble and say, all right, I could have protected you from this. That guy could have turned left instead of turning right, but I decreed, because you have chosen to walk away from me, I am going to let this happen. And so God is going to stir up trouble, and so Solomon's going to have this, and he then says, because of this idolatry, because you turned from me, I'm going to tear the kingdom away from you. However, I will leave a remnant, and so Israel will split in two after Solomon dies. Check out the side notes that I've got coming out here. I'm going to cover some of the passages that deal with God's sovereignty, because again, God is sovereign. God will do things to both prod us back into the right way and try to discipline us into getting back right with him. And so that's a little bit of a side note that we won't get into in the main body of the text right now. But again, check out some of the side notes we've got coming out, and it'll deal with how this whole sovereignty aspect plays out. But this is the life of Solomon, and this is what Solomon's going to go through. And again, we'll dig into Solomon's life more with the body of Ecclesiastes itself. And so guys, if this content is helpful, again, like and subscribe. Those are extremely helpful to me. And if you want to see a side note, check out the side note. Leave a comment below if you want me to cover one specifically. But I'll start leaving some of this content in the side note playlist for you. And I will catch you guys later. This is Mike signing out on the Summer of Ecclesiastes.